question in the question bar. Ah, there we go. Now I think we're live. Thank you. Okay. So there's everybody's pictures. I think now we're all synced with everybody. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for our person that's answering this in the question mark. Okay, good. All right. Let's talk about why we're here. So really, this session is to appeal to three different audiences. One are eDiscovery professionals at large, one is privacy professionals at large, and the other is privacy hiring managers who are specifically looking for talent potentially on their team. So what we're going to do today, and a lot of you who are eDiscovery professionals that are on this call have already taken the first step and figured out, hey, here's why I want to transition into privacy, but we'll help define that psychology at a broader level very quickly, and then spend the most of today's webinar talking about how to do it, helping hiring managers in privacy understand the eDiscovery professional skill set, how it may overlap, and then helping them understand what are those gaps that we need to fill in terms of skill set or education in order to leverage all that overlap. And then, of course, we want privacy pros to have a more enriched understanding of eDiscovery talent, just as eDiscovery talent has a more enriched understanding of privacy, because I'm a big believer that we're at a pinnacle where there's going to be a great convergence of all disciplines, whether it's security or governance or risk or discovery or privacy. There's going to be a coalescence of all these different disciplines coming together to collaborate in a way that is sticky, in a way that is meaningful, and that cross-pollination of skill sets in those that possess multiple facets of discipline are likely going to be the leaders over the next decade. And there's still lots of opportunity for people in all areas of discipline to move into any of these spaces. So that's why we're here. I'm going to quickly go through the job market intelligence that we see happening at True, and there's a lot of words on this slide so that it's all available to those of you that want to reference it in the future. I'm going to go through this very quickly. If I had $1 for every eDiscovery professional that said I want to work at a corporation, I could have retired years ago. The reality, though, is that there's only about 10% of jobs in the eDiscovery market available in the marketplace. Most of those jobs are out at the service provider, law firm, consulting firm side of the business. In privacy, it's quite the opposite. About 80% of the jobs we're seeing in the marketplace are coming directly from corporations. Most corporations are generally outsourcing their eDiscovery. That industry is surprisingly a bit more mature than the privacy vertical from a job market perspective, and as a result has commoditized, went through some rapid changes during the economic collapse of 2008 to 2010, and as a result, corporations are now pushing the work, particularly the service aspects, out to SaaS providers, to managed service providers, and so the jobs are going in that direction too. And there are less fully dedicated eDiscovery professionals inside major corporations, whereas in privacy we're seeing the opposite trend. The trend right now in privacy is for corporations to insource and operationalize privacy programmatically. And we'll get to some of the ways you can learn that knowledge, certainly through a CIPM, later in the program. We are also seeing that in privacy, the number of new jobs, meaning net new add to staff, these are not jobs that are replacements for attrition, is actually up about 30% year over year for the last 2 years. So there's a lot more jobs out there all of a sudden. eDiscovery pros may find their fastest path to getting a corporate job in America is through privacy, not ESI. And as we talk to our constituents in eDiscovery, we found that 2 out of every 4 ESI pros would consider a pay cut, if necessary, to transition to a corporate and or privacy job. It's compelling data. So there's a lot of you who are on this call that are like, yeah, you just told my story, man. How do I do it? So here's why now the time is right. Here's what's happening in the privacy job market. Demand is higher than supply. There are more jobs than there are people that are right for those jobs available in the marketplace right now. And this was eDiscovery 10 years ago, which was part of the reason I got into that space then, and part of the reason why I saw that would be a good one to be in. People are going to need leadership. People are going to need representation. People are going to need help finding talent. And that doesn't just mean identifying people with the skills. That means helping usher in a new generation of people that can develop those skills. We're seeing a swelling of the middle market right now. There's a growing shift to operationalizing privacy, which opens the door for a lot of people that maybe felt privacy was only for JDs and would really be a law practice. We're seeing that that's absolutely not the case. It's very operational. There's lots of diversity within privacy programs for people to contribute. We're also seeing privacy leaders who are well tenured in the space moving into data strategy jobs, moving up into bigger roles where privacy is a part of their domain, but not the entirety of it. And as a result, privacy pros are driving a lot of initiatives, whether that's overseeing governance, discovery, monetization of data, investor relations. We're seeing all sorts of evolutions happening at the high end of the market, which is creating opportunity for people to move up into those vacated jobs, which is expanding the middle market of the job market, which is expanding the opportunity for bottom-up hiring for people to break into the space. So it's a great time to be looking in privacy or already in privacy. And ultimately, what this will mean as privacy pros, some of you might be saying, eDiscovery, how is this really going to impact me? We're seeing our privacy leaders who evolved beyond privacy inheriting those responsibilities and having to make decisions about hiring people in eDiscovery or moving eDiscovery as part of the portfolio of things that they handle for the corporation. So that's a little bit of market intelligence. Now, how do we do it? This is where I want to bring in our panelists who are all brilliant. I've worked with all of them and have tremendous respect for them. And Mike, you and I have known each other for almost decades now. How many people, Mike, do you think you've hired in the last 20 years?
Oh, dozens. Yeah, I mean, at two big law firms, and then, you know, I mean, even if you consider my consulting practice, it's just dozens. I'm just interviewing has become sort of you know, second nature to me, and even in my current role at the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists, we're hiring.
And you put together this bullet point, right, in identifying for us eDiscovery hiring managers and what they're looking for. Walk us through some of these choices and tell us a little bit about why you boiled it down to these 5 skill sets.
Sure. So these are sort of my top 5, right? And there are other things. And I should start by saying, you know, there's a great book out there, and the name of the book is it's simply called Who by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. And it's a really good reference for folks who are in a hiring position. And it's great for people who are looking to get hired as well, because it just gives some insight into, you know, the hiring of human talent. But this list really comes about because of my experience. And what I'm really talking about when we say project leadership, does this person, do they understand process? Do they have organizational skills? Communication skills I find to be perhaps the single most important skill that I look for in someone. And then part of project leadership, I think, too, is just the ability to lead. Can you motivate others to get the work done, right? Consultative skills are really about, can I put this person in a room with high-functioning lawyers and Fortune 500 leaders, and will they be able to hold their own, give sound guidance, and you know, push back tactfully against reticent leaders? So many times in eDiscovery we come up against pressures that prevent us from doing what we do best, whether it's regarding data or privacy or eDiscovery process. And you have to be able to advise reticent leaders on how to sort of push back on those things. And then subject matter expertise, or what I call the sort of the body of knowledge, right? In the project management world, and certainly in eDiscovery, there's what I refer to as context. And you've got to, more specifically, do you understand the legal process? If you're working in eDiscovery, do you understand? Do you have the context to know that, you know, here's how a legal dispute starts, and here's how it progresses, and here's how it ends? You know, it's like a project unto itself. All projects have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so you have to have context or the landscape for the situation you're in, right? And so in eDiscovery, we're looking for, do they understand legal process? And then technical skills, I put a good deal of emphasis here because they are, in the eDiscovery space, certainly there's a need to understand legal technology in general, you know, whether it's data storage or processing or how a particular eDiscovery platform works, the inner workings of the, you know, the vast market of legal technology is incredibly important. So I like to ask a bunch of questions about where people are particularly skilled. And then my last thing that really just isn't on this list, I guess we changed this slide, is sort of the cultural fit, the piece that does this person fit into the environment? Do they sort of understand the values and the mission of the organization? Jared, those are my sort of top 5 or 6, and those are the things that I use to when I'm hiring.
So, Mike, tell us, what is of these? What's the hardest to train, and what of these are the skills you're most willing to train?
Oh, without a doubt, the consultative piece to me. It's the hardest thing, and it kind of ties in because project managers are consultants, right? And so the hardest thing to do is take someone fairly junior and teach them how to be in that room with those high-functioning lawyers and Fortune 500 leaders. I can teach anybody how to use a piece of software. I can teach anybody basic processes across the eDiscovery spectrum. I can even teach somebody the values of my company and the landscape of the legal process. But the consultative piece is really that human interactive piece that really just comes with experience and knowing how to read people and body language and all those kind of soft things that really don't come across on a resume, and sometimes you can't even really pick up on them during an interview.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction, and one of the reasons why I think we dropped culture from this list is because culture is always going to be, in my mind, very specific to the individual organization with which someone is interviewing for. And I wanted to try to boil this down to things that were where that didn't matter, right? But broadly, as we're looking at pools of people for any organization. And I love that you separated consultative skills from subject matter expertise, because I think often people get the two confused and often think of them as the same. What you're describing in terms of consultative skills are things that really come with experience, right? You're going to need to have some experience in order to learn from watching and learn from failing in order to really have the confidence to bring that kind of energy into a room. But what you're not talking about is very specific industry knowledge or a piece of technology that allows them to be consultative about that. And I draw this parallel because I think a lot of eDiscovery professionals come with great consultative skills, though they may know nothing of privacy today. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And what we're really talking about here is assessing whether the person has the skills you need for the job. And what I generally do for myself is I think about the key skills that I need to apply to a particular role, and I assess the person's level of expertise and experience in that context. It may make sense to identify more specific or technical skills too, but you're really just looking at the individual for what is their potential, right? And again, I can teach people a lot of things. There are some things that you can't really teach, but the consultative piece is one of those experiential things that comes, I think, over time and through experience.
Mike, tell us, where does ACEDS help fill the gaps that might be listed here? What are some of the things that people would learn getting an ACEDS certification that would help them fill some of these requirements?
Sure. So as I said, ACEDS is the world's leading training and certification association. We fill that educational gap. If you are a junior person in eDiscovery and you're looking to up your skills, we can help you with that. We can provide you with the advanced training and ultimately the certification that we offer to really up your game in the eDiscovery space. But apart from that, we also believe very much in community and bringing together people who are in like situations and like-minded so that they can compare notes and sort of war stories and get guidance from other people who might be more experienced. One of the things we're doing more coming up this year is we're going to start a mentorship program that really pairs a very senior person with a more junior person so that we can uplift their career. So to answer your question, I think ACEDS really fills the education gap, and that's our mission, really.
I love that, and it's a great transition into hearing a little bit from Ron as he takes us over the privacy perspective as a hiring manager in the space. Ron, we haven't known each other as long, but I know that you've had a lot of experience hiring people. Tell us a little bit about how you came to these 5 points, and what are some of the more salient experiences you've had that have led you to this deduction?
Sure. Well, you put this in really great context, just kind of describing the privacy profession, and we are in a situation now where a lot of companies are in need of privacy talent, and as you noted, not enough privacy professionals to go around at this point in time. So, a lot of companies, when they're looking for privacy talent, they're looking for skill sets like the ones that we've listed on this slide, because it really is this type of person that tends to be very successful in the privacy profession, and it really begins with the type of people that you listed on one of your initial slides. 2 of 4 people willing to take a pay cut. That was really surprising to me. Nobody should take a pay cut to get into the privacy profession, but that's the type of mindset I think that is very admirable and tends to lend itself to somebody who's going to be very successful because they want to be there. They really want to get into privacy. And typically that's driven by understanding the why behind privacy. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And ultimately, this is not just about privacy compliance. It's not just about legal. It's about protecting consumers. And it's a very noble profession. It's something that people really enjoy getting up to do every day, because at the end of the day, your work matters, and your work, will result in protecting your clients, protecting prospects. You're looking out for consumers, and that's really fun. I mean, and it really lends itself to people who have that mindset, that really want to be in that area. And so I think that's kind of where we begin. Communication skills, I think, is really critical for any job, and particularly in privacy, because you have so many different disciplines that contribute to your privacy program. You have security people, data governance, legal, the business, compliance, risk. And oftentimes, the most successful people are the ones who can translate between those areas, the people who can speak, tech with the tech experts, and also speak with the lawyers, and then speak with the IT folks, and kind of translate between one area to the other, and be able to understand the audience, be able to speak their language, and help people understand what you're trying to accomplish. And also, talking all the way up to the top of the organization, the people who are comfortable going into large committees, potentially board meetings, talking to regulators, explaining what you're trying to accomplish, how you're trying to accomplish that. There's just lots of opportunities for people at different levels of the organization, but ultimately they all require a good sense of communication, written and verbal. The motivation we kind of talked about, this is really prevalent in privacy, because you're not going to find in privacy too many jobs that are, here's your job description, this is what you do, this is the end of the story. Almost everybody in this profession is reaching beyond their job description, because the landscape is changing dramatically all the time. And so what your job is today may look different 2 months from now, 3 months from now. And a lot of times it really requires, individuals to step up and stretch themselves to get into uncomfortable situations in terms of their skill set or knowledge or experience, and not be afraid to fail and really test themselves. We see a lot of that, and it's really a necessity in privacy because of how the landscape is shifting. The willingness to learn, subject matter expertise, that's critical too. Even just the laws that we're trying to align our companies to are changing right before our eyes. They change week to week, month to month. It's very difficult even for seasoned privacy professionals and lawyers to get their arms around it, and to really make sure that you're fully compliant with what is applicable to your company. It's a moving target, so it really requires somebody who likes to learn, we'll dig in and try to analyze the situation and figure out how that applies to your company, how you can help, where your skill sets might, lend itself to helping the company with these challenges. That's very important. And the final one is that I think it's critically important for everybody to really understand technology and data, which, for this audience is perfect, but I think it's true for everybody. Even if you're in a role that is, purely legal, for example, you really have to understand the technologies that you're dealing with. If you're not on social media, or if you've never, picked up an Alexa, or, if you don't have an iPhone, you kind of have to really be familiar with the technology that you're dealing with, how it impacts your consumers, and how it might impact your ability to comply with these privacy laws. So those are some of the foundational skills I would point to.
When you're interviewing candidates, Ron, how does a candidate demonstrate to you that they are self-motivated or that they have a willingness to learn? What are the things that you're looking for to hear from a candidate that signal that kind of quality?
Oftentimes candidates will come from, very common situations. A lot of companies just don't have privacy programs that are where they would like to be, so they might be understaffed. They may not have had a privacy program at all. And a lot of times you'll find real self-starters, people who may not have even had a privacy role in the organization, and they raised their hand and said, I'll take it, I'll develop our privacy policy, or I'll develop an incident response program, whatever it might be. You tend to see those qualities in people where it's obvious from the resume that, they evolved not because management came to them and said, I would like you to do the following 5 to 10 things to help us with privacy. A lot of times you're going to find the opposite, where people, have found that the company has a need, they think they can help, they've extended themselves, and it shows in their resume and as they're interviewing that, again, this is something they wanted to do. They've raised their hand, they volunteered, and now they're making it happen. And a lot of times that's where people got their start, and then it leads to maybe a privacy-specific position at a different company or within their own company, and that gets them, off to the races with privacy. You see it a lot, and I think you'll continue to see it because it kind of goes back to that fact that companies just don't have the privacy talent right now. They don't have enough people, and there aren't enough seasoned privacy pros to go around. So I think you're going to continue to see this pattern.
And a similar question on the technology piece. What are some of the questions that you ask on interviews to really suss out the technological prowess of an individual, and how many of those skills are typically vertical specific?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't always focus on this as much as I should when I'm interviewing people, but I think, you can tease it out just by talking through some of the issues at hand. When you talk about something like the California Consumer Protection Privacy Act, or GDPR, and some of the issues that companies are wrestling with as it relates to technology, that's where it tends to come out when people, you might have a conversation about, behavioral advertising or the use of cookies, that type of thing, where you might get into a specific conversation about legal challenges that are very common throughout different industries. And the responses that you'll get will oftentimes indicate whether somebody is really paying attention, is savvy to some of the issues, and they may offer up specific examples of how it may apply to your company. I've had really outstanding candidates who have, they've read through our company's privacy policy, and they'll come in and say, hey, what do you think about this emerging technology? It might be artificial intelligence or something like that, where they indicate, I'm paying attention to this landscape. I know what's going on, and I've thought through how it might impact your particular company, and I'd like to have a conversation with you about that. That's the kind of homework that a candidate can do that could really make a big difference.
That's great practical stuff. I love that. I'm sure people are scribbling down notes furiously. And I think lots of light bulbs are going off because as you talk, Ron, a lot of the eDiscovery professionals I see on the call are going, that's definitely us. I definitely do that, just in a different way. Okay, so let's take a look at this overlapping chart here where these skills overlap. And it's interesting because I think what you'll find here is obviously there's a lot more in the middle, and some of those light bulbs that I just mentioned, Ron, are probably things like liaising between IT and legal. I mean, this is the historic necessity of eDiscovery professionals in their space, really when it got started, helping bridge that gap. Right? A common phrase we hear from hiring managers, I need someone to bridge that gap. They got to speak legalese, and they got to speak technology, and they got to know how to go back and forth and communicate all sorts of things. Mike, I want to kick it back to you real quick. What are some of the things here that in the middle of our Venn diagram that maybe we didn't touch on that are worth drawing some attention to that really point to the ability of an individual to transition from one to the other?
So I think I'd focus a little bit. I mean, we talked about process a little bit, right? But so the eDiscovery landscape is sort of, you know, I view each node of the electronic discovery reference model as sort of a project unto itself. And so you really want to have these sort of repeatable, defensible processes baked in there. You know, we didn't talk a great deal about balancing business and legal needs, but you know that's an incredibly important skill. You know, understanding the business. How does this organization, whether you work at a private company, a law firm, or a service provider, how does this organization make money? How am I contributing to the business? And what are the legal needs of the business? You know, sense of urgency is kind of subjective, so I think I'm going to stay away from that. But that liaison between IT and legal is critical, and I have to tell you that I've built an entire career on being that guy, being the person that can work not just with the information technologists and understanding basic infrastructure. I mean, I'm not going to build a server room, I'm not going to build a network, but I know enough to be dangerous. But I also know enough to know the right questions to ask. And the career I've built has really been on translating that IT speak, if you will, for the legal professionals. And that's sort of a critical skill in the space. Those are a couple of things that we didn't talk about. Ethics, yeah, there are ethics in eDiscovery. They really more, I think, tie into the lawyer duty of competence, and anybody working for a lawyer has a similar responsibility. But there's incredible overlap between the two, and I'm fascinated to be part of this discussion today.
Ron, can you just jump in on balancing the business and legal needs? Because I think with privacy, maybe even more hyperbole than in eDiscovery, there's real opportunity there for people who understand that dichotomy and can leverage it for an organization. Tell us a little bit how balancing business and legal needs plays a role in the average privacy professional's day.
Yeah, it's really huge because, you know, if you go back 3 to 5 years ago, I think privacy really was considered a very heavy compliance exercise. And now with how technology is so prolific and it's growing tremendously, the capabilities are there, the business wants to latch on to those and they want to take advantage of those as they should. And so a privacy professional now has to really be a business facilitator, and privacy more so than ever before can be a business differentiator, and it can add significant value to the business or the clients, you know, if privacy is involved. So, you know, privacy has become a user experience and product design issue. It's more than a compliance or legal exercise. But at the end of the day, you also do have to comply. So it takes a balance. It takes lots of different skill sets that work together. And, this is where, you have to really be business-minded as a privacy professional in addition to the legal or compliance aspect. You want to have a seat at the table. You don't want to be that checkbox at the end of the day that people are avoiding having that conversation. You'd like to be a business partner that they want to involve in the conversation and have, to be a trusted advisor throughout the life cycle of building products and services. And that's how you really successfully balance this by proving that privacy, it can really, really help in addition to just making sure you're compliant.
Fantastic. As we move on, because we have a lot more to cover, I just think it's worth drawing attention to some of the things that are not in the center and what are very exclusive to eDiscovery and privacy. And when you really break that down, and this is the point we're driving to as we move to Debbie and Rita, is you've got a set of very specific skills and or technologies on either side. GDPR, CCPA, there are laws and regulations. You can learn these by getting your CIPPE, and we'll talk about our CIPP US, we'll talk about that. TrustArc and OneTrust happen to be technologies that are very visible in the space that more clients are asking us for now. The eDiscovery side, same thing. Relativity is a software, Law and Nuix are softwares that are technology specific that a lot of clients ask for. But these are all things that can be learned. These are educations you can go out and get, whether it's through your employer or as an individual. You just have to do the one thing that both Mike and Ron covered, which is show the initiative, show the willingness. And the best way to show your willingness to learn is to go out and learn something. And all these things in these other side, with maybe the exception of the reporting piece, you can actually go learn. You can go get a SED certification. You can go get relativity certifications. You can get a privacy certification in technology or broadly from the IAPP. But it's amazing how much that initiative really has to start from the self. So one of the areas that we have seen a real opportunity for overlap, and we're going to move through this section quickly, is DSAR and discovery request. These are activities, the DSAR and privacy and the discovery request in eDiscovery. Ron, could you just define for our listeners quickly what is a DSAR?
Sure. So that's a data subject access request, which essentially is a term that came from the GDPR, which is the massive EU privacy law that came down a couple of years ago. It now is common terminology to represent, consumer requests that come in seeking to access data or potentially delete data that you have on them. The big focus right now is on the CCPA, which I mentioned earlier, the new California law that has something that is akin to a DSAR. We're going to see more state laws this year that will have similar concepts, and essentially what it boils down to is a consumer coming to your company and saying, tell me all of the data that you have about me. What information have you collected about me? And there are certain obligations for that company to respond with the categories or potentially the actual data that they have about that consumer. And then the other aspect would be the right to delete. Potentially a consumer could come to you and say, I would like you to delete all of my data. So and it's not just tell me what you have, but I want it gone. And so that's another component that eDiscovery professionals may be perfectly situated to assist with.
So I want to bring in the data diva now, Debbie Reynolds, and define for our listeners what a discovery request is, and please draw similarities between the two for us.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jared. So a discovery request is when a party or even a court may ask for documents or information related to particular what we call issues, where another party has to respond within a certain amount of time to be able to get this information to them. In the eDiscovery vernacular, we call this discovery, and this data exchange is called a production. So DSAR request is very similar to this, where as opposed to issues, maybe we can relate that to a DSAR request in terms of categories of information, and also the data that the company is actually being asked to divulge or give information about. And then also, obviously, with the CCPA, people have the ability to ask for things to be deleted. But if you're working with a company that has any exposure in Europe and has to comply with something like the GDPR in Europe, they may actually have to change or correct the information. So the process is very similar. For me, I sort of think about it, when I'm thinking about privacy and eDiscovery, I'm thinking about it, a lot of the core skills that are used in both are very similar, especially on the operational side, but the why is different. So for eDiscovery, the why is litigation or some legal matter, where in privacy, the why is because you're trying to make sure that either your company is complying with the rights of consumers, or that you're responding to consumers in the best way to be able to have the type of compliance that either a company needs or that you and I as a individual expect based on sort of the laws and our rights as individuals.
So Debbie, I imagine that one difference between a discovery request and DSAR requests is there's probably not as many per capita litigants and discovery requests, but when there are, the volume of data that they might request could be massive. On the flip side, with a DSAR, the volume of data may not be massive, but the amount of people asking for that data on an ongoing cyclical basis could potentially be overwhelming. Where do you see eDiscovery professionals who deal with discovery requests being able to come in and impact a more successful DSAR program? What skill sets are the most transferable?
I think being able to create a process and procedure and sort of see the whole process from like a bird's eye view, and also breaking that down into phases. So in eDiscovery, we do have things like the EDRM and sort of phases of how we handle types of discovery requests, but we can also translate those types of skills or those types of process into a DSAR request or a program or a process or a policy for how companies handle that. Obviously, for privacy, it's a broader customer base. So you know, as you said, you have more people asking maybe for less data, but that creates more work and more churn on the company to try to figure out the best way to do that, whether that be automating a process, creating a procedure that makes this process go more smoothly, being able to help companies find data. So this is another thing that the eDiscovery people are very good at, working with people on things like data maps, being able to identify where data is, being able to identify what data should or shouldn't be released, working with the legal team, and also just building those relationships across different parts of businesses.
I love all those really practical pieces of advice. I think that's great advice. Debbie, I want everyone to hear your story a little bit about some of the highlights of why and how you were able to make this transition so successfully. Tell us just very quickly, what were those aha moments for you over the last couple decades of your career where you started to see the signs and then make choices that led you to becoming a privacy professional?
Sure, absolutely. In 1997, my mother actually was reading a book called A Right to Privacy, and for me, at that age, I think living in the U.S., we think, oh, we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we have all these rights. But when you drill down into privacy, you start to see that it's very different than what you think it is. So over the years, I sort of kept just keeping an eye on it, mostly as me as a consumer, my own interest in my own data. But then as I was working or transitioning initially from kind of a library science data background into eDiscovery, I started working with multinational corporations that had interest in all different parts of the world in handling data. So when you're working with data in different countries, you have to understand the different laws, the different regulations, because there's no technology that's going to stop you from breaking a law having to do with data. So you have to understand those laws. So one of the bigger aha moments that I had was working on a case with data in France, and France has things like blocking statutes where there's certain data that even if someone wanted to give you, they can't because it's against the law in France. And then also the idea that a consumer or a person who has data, they can decide, they have to give their consent, and their consent can be very granular. So in something like eDiscovery, we're accustomed in the U.S. to go into a company and say, to a GC and say, we need 2 years of someone's email address, where in France we have to say to this person, not to the GC, but the individual, we need 2 years of your email, and they said no. And then they said, this particular person said, well, you can only have 1 year of my email address, 1 year of my email, but you can only look at things that are marked red. So anything that's marked unread, you can't look at. So that created like a technological and sort of a process flow challenge for us to try to make sure we're complying with the person's consent and their request to do this. So that was a very big moment for me. And then I started about 5 or 6 years ago. Corporations were calling me directly asking me about privacy, and this was a little bit before the GDPR came out, because a lot of people knew that I knew all these things. I worked with companies that had interest in like India, Japan, China, Australia, all of Europe, South America, Central America. So it just sort of evolved naturally from there, and then over the last 4 or 5 years, the majority of my work, or the majority of the things people ask me about, has been privacy. So it made sense for me to transition there. And I've expanded a lot of my network around the world, and I work with software companies that are trying to move either from Europe to the U.S. or from the U.S. to Europe to sort of boil down those areas of, or get past those areas where it's a barrier to adoption to different technologies in this space. So I do attend conferences. I'm asked to speak at a lot of conferences quite a bit. And I very much appreciate the IAPP and a lot of their resources, especially, not everyone has to be a member of IAPP. They have a lot of resources that you can look into before you even decide if you want to join the organization.
I think now's a great time to introduce Rita and let her tell us a little bit about what that pathway is, what the education pathways look like with the IAPP. I will tell you, as somebody who's staffed now over 3,000 people in these two verticals over the last decade, that the said certification for non-software specific skill sets in eDiscovery is the gold standard. The IAPP's portfolio of certifications is absolutely the same when it comes to privacy. I believe they broke 50,000 members and over 25,000 people who were certified. Rita, tell us how we do it, what we get, what those pathways look like. I'm sure this is the moment we've all been waiting for.
Okay, well, gee, I don't even know why you have me on this program. You guys are explaining the IAPP probably even better than I can. But so as you mentioned, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, we're obviously a membership association for privacy professionals, including people who are working toward becoming a privacy professional and seeking that first job. We're the largest and most comprehensive global information privacy community. And we help practitioners develop and advance their careers through all the ways that membership associations normally do these things. We're founded in 2000, so we have our 20th anniversary this year, as Dave mentioned. We're a not-for-profit organization, and as you also alluded to, we've just experienced a really hockey stick growth in the last couple of years, especially post-GDPR, and frankly, with all the comprehensive privacy laws now being passed throughout the world, including so much going on in the United States. We have over 50,000 members, which you just said, and we have these chapters called KnowledgeNet chapters in over 100 countries, and probably, depending on where you're living, the folks who are on the call now, we may very well have a KnowledgeNet chapter in your hometown, so you should look into it. Even if you're not a member, you can get invited to go to a KnowledgeNet event and just meet some people locally, and I highly encourage you to do that just to improve your understanding of what doing privacy looks like and to meet some people locally and start your network right where you live. So what do we do to help professionals who are looking to transition from whatever they're currently doing professionally into privacy? Well, as mentioned, we obviously have a lot of resources that you can find on our website. You can subscribe to the daily dashboard without being a member. Just get a profile and give us your email address, and we'll send you daily updates on news and happenings in privacy and data protection around the world. If you want to join and become a member, you can gain access to a little bit more in-depth research, white papers, and some of our online resources that are really absolutely critical to being able to do the job on a daily basis. But one of the things I think we're here to talk about is, let's say you're not a privacy pro now, but you want to be. How do you just get started? What does it take? And it's completely possible and frankly advised that you switch over from another profession to privacy rather than starting from scratch. I would think most of our professionals already have 5 to 8 years in another profession before they switch into privacy. There's absolutely room for entry-level roles, but it is true, I think, and you've probably found that a lot of people are really lateraling into privacy from another role, either within an organization or from an outside law or compliance or obviously eDiscovery role. I personally, Mike described himself as a recovering law firm manager. Well, I'm a recovering law school academic. I worked for 14 years in higher ed teaching on the law school faculty, and there I was an intellectual property law expert, and I decided that privacy sounded like fun, and so how do I transition into privacy from IP? Well, one of the things I did was I studied for and took the CIPP US, which is one of our certification exams. And just by studying the books, just by getting the foundational books, the Intro to US Privacy Law, I was able to, in a few hours, really transition my mind and my knowledge set into a new field of law. Now, taking the exam doesn't necessarily make you smarter, but it does give you the signal. It signals to a potential employer or your current employer that you've made the investment to get up to speed and to pass an exam to show that you have some at least minimal competency in the subject matter of the area of law. And we have several flavors of Certified Information Privacy Pro. There's a U.S. exam. There's one focused on Europe, the CIPP-E, incredibly detailed textbook, very helpful to read if you want to understand the history of data protection law in the EU and what the GDPR is all about. I mean, it's an excellent desk resource, even if you don't take the exam. But the how of privacy, really the program management role, the day-to-day, how do you do this, that's the CIPM, the Certified Information Privacy Manager. And I think one of the questions that we've had is, so how do you take these tests? What's the best way to prep for them? Now because I have a law degree and I worked in law academia, felt very comfortable reading the books and taking the exam, maybe taking some online practice tests and things. But some people would rather go to a class, and we offer training. We offer live training and online training if you want to sit in a classroom and really have someone explain the material to you that way. So it sort of depends on how good you are at test taking and how comfortable you are with learning material just through reading it. Some people would rather hear it out loud as well, and so that's all your learning style. But we certainly offer as many things as you need to help you get prepared for the exam. I wanted to say one more thing, which was just to reference one of the fun things about being in the field of privacy and the impact that you can make on the organization, the way that you can interact with management and really affect the business is, yes, through your interactions with the decision-making and product development and in marketing and helping to influence and train people to be privacy sensitive in how they communicate. But I often hear directly from customers who have questions about how we handle their data, and I can then see how they perceive our company. What they're seeing is the impact of our brand or our data practices on their lives. So it's a really neat way to do full circle, and I don't know if eDiscovery lawyers really get to talk to humans who are the customers of the company as often as someone who does privacy work does. So I wanted to bring in the consumer aspect of this and the fact that you really do get customer contact in the role of a privacy pro, and it's very rewarding work. So at any rate, that's my speech. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I love it. I love it. And before we talk about how everybody can get this free education, I just have a few follow-up questions that I know the audience is seething over, which are, do you need to get one of the CIPP certifications, the what, before you get a CIPM or a CIPT? Or if you're more interested in the operational technical side of things, can or should you skip to those certifications?
Well, I'm biased in favor of the what, because since I have a law training, I find that the most interesting. I personally am less interested in the process stuff, but that's just what I am interested in, not necessarily what's helpful. So one of the things I would suggest is, are you currently working for a company? Have you already picked up privacy subject matter on your own? Maybe the M then helps you figure out how to transition into a privacy role from the role that you currently have. If you are coming at privacy without any operational or compliance experience, I think I'd start with the what. I think you really need to have a sense for what the background is, what the history is, before you try to figure out how to do it. So it sort of depends on where you're starting, but that's my short answer.
And in terms of in demand, because I know some of you are probably asking, well, what are hiring managers most looking for? I think most want to see a CIPP US and or E in terms of the most leverage, right? There are less jobs in Canada and Asia, generally speaking, for this than there are in the US and in Europe. And those tend to be the triggers that hiring managers are looking for. Ron, I'm curious, tell us a little bit about how these certifications play into your hiring decisions, and is preference given to people who have them?
Yeah, you know, I think that they're very important. They've been critically important to my growth as a privacy professional, really almost echoing exactly what Rita said about, you know, coming from the law angle. That was where I came from as well. And so I started with the CIPP, you know, a million years ago, it feels like, to really just kind of dive into privacy and figure out the landscape, you know, learning just the basics. And I think that I would agree that that is really the foundation. It's really important. I do place some emphasis on this. I'm mandating it for all of the members of my team currently. You know, you've seen other companies like OneTrust, for example. They mandate the CIPP for all employees. It really is a foundational exercise. It's very important. You know, the others, you know, depending on your role, they're all very important for particular roles. I have taken a number of them. I've done the Canadian certification, the EU certification, the CIPM. And CIPM, I think, was also critically important to my development. And it kind of gets to John's question on the screen about the transition, you know, from a compliance professional perspective into privacy. For me, that was a weakness in my privacy expertise when I was being asked to shift from being a privacy lawyer to a privacy you know, officer, a program manager. You know, lawyers tend to react to problems. You know, you have an incident, you have a contract to look at, you have a complaint, maybe, you know, there's an inquiry from a regulator. You're always reacting to things. Whereas as a privacy professional, you have to be proactive. You have to have a true program, and understanding what that program looks like and the different components of it is really where the CIPM is really, really helpful. And so depending on the role, CIPM can also be a very important asset to have. And John, for you, you know, I would tell you that I've hired 2 different people who are direct reports who have a title called Director of Privacy Compliance, and neither of them had any previous privacy experience. And really what I was looking for is somebody who truly understands compliance. They understand how to do risk assessments, testing, monitoring, training, you know, all of the components of a compliance framework. If somebody has really great expertise in those particular areas, the transition to privacy can actually be fairly seamless, because that is a skill set that a lot of companies really need right now.
I'm going to give Mike the last word because I know how passionate he is about the value of certification, and then we'll close there as we are at the hour. Mike, share with us your thoughts and feelings in general on certification.
So really quickly, just because I know we're running short on time, but I completely echo everything that Dave said. I think that, I'm sorry, Ron, I'm looking at the screen and watching the well, whatever. Look, it comes down to this. When you're measuring the value of a certification, this is true of any certification. I've got a project management certification. I've got the eDiscovery certification. There's probably tons of professionals on the line today with various different certifications. Bottom line, as a hiring manager, when I'm looking at resumes, if I see someone has a certification in an area in which I'm hiring, whether that's privacy, eDiscovery, project management, or some other area, I know that person has what I referred to earlier as that foundation, that context, that basic skill set. It gives me a baseline to say, okay, I don't need to ask this guy, little questions about, I know that he's got the certification. And so that's the value to me, that and the continuing education. Most certifications require a continuing learning effort. And so I know that person is not just past that exam, but is also taking steps to continuously stay in tune with what's going on in the industry. To me, that's the value of a certification. It helps hiring managers a great deal when we're looking at resumes.
Everyone can get certification for free. We have partnered with ACEDS and with IAPP and this host of other technology products that are in both spaces to give away nearly $200,000 in free training and education. So cost is no longer the excuse for getting more education. And I think, to echo Mike's point, showing the initiative that you went out and got training, whether you pay for it or you win it on our program, is the willingness to learn that is demonstrative, that helps you make this kind of transition. I want to encourage everybody to send your questions. Dave will tell you where. We'll answer any of them that we didn't get to today, but I really want to encourage everyone to apply to the scholarship program. Thank you for having us, and I'll hand it back to you, Dave.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jared and Rita and Mike and Debbie and Ron, for that excellent presentation. We got a number of thank yous and some congratulations through the Q&A panel for folks that seem to really enjoy the program today. We answered a lot of the questions in lines, so we took those, but as Jared just mentioned, as you can see, if you're watching this live, as you can see in front of you, we've got live links that go to emails for all of us. Go ahead and take a moment now, if you're on the live program, click that link to our emails and queue up a note to us and dash that off, and we'll do our best to answer those questions for you. A huge thank you to Trustaffing Partners for collaborating with us in a joint, really equal partnership, putting this together. It was really a pleasure working with the team over there. Nice to bridge these two audiences, and it was a really terrific project to work on together, so thank you all. If you have just a moment and can click the live link in front of you there, we have a quick survey. It literally takes 2 minutes. We've timed it, just a few quick questions. Let us know how we're doing here at the IAPP on these web conferences. We'd love to get your feedback. Please help us improve these programs as we move forward. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, if you're an IAPP certified privacy professional and you're wondering about upkeeping the certifications, which we were just talking about, and you registered for this webinar, you're automatically going to be granted 1 CPE credit toward the annual upkeep of your certification. If you're an attorney and you're wondering about continuing legal education credits, or CLEs, we don't pre-certify those programs, but you can apply in your particular jurisdiction, and hopefully that will be accepted. If you need supporting materials, my email is there in front of you. So thanks very much, everybody, for joining us one last time. It was a pleasure having you on the program, and I look forward to seeing you on another program in the near future. With that, I'll take us to a program close.